Hello and most welcome to H909 of the Heidegger series. I will today talk about self-closure and the case against self-closure. And I think there is a lot of things going the same way. Let me give you an example. This is already at the folder of the second part of Ian McGilchrist's fantastic book, The Matter with Things, Our Brains, Our Delusions and the Unmaking of the World. As is in the subtitle, this is more or less rephrased on the cover here. We have become blind to what the subtler, more intelligent and more perceptive right hemisphere sees. Consequently, we no longer seem to have the faintest idea who we are, what the world is, and how we relate to it. Indeed, there is a sense in which we no longer live in the world at all, but exist in a simulacrum of our own making. I think this can be looked from different books telling the same tale. This one by Edward de Bono, I Am Right, You Are Wrong, How to Break the Black and White Thinking. And this is the magnum opus, or rather his philosophical heritage. And what he criticizes here, or try to reveal, is that thinking dies in something called the loop. Let me phrase something from page 162. Edward de Bono writes here about reasonableness and how that could cause a loop. Many years ago he was in Moscow and he found out that Trotsky's Red Star of the Red Army, Trotsky was the founder of the Red Army after the revolution, did not have anything to do with communism. Instead, it was Trotsky's interest in the Kabbalah, and it starts from the pentagram, which is one of the most important symbols. But also, when you go to the American establishment of military, that is also in a building and often mentioned as Pentagon. That has to be some meaning to it. And this is how the brain works. It tries to find similarity. And according to Edward de Bono, the brain is in itself an automatic similarity machine. So what it does is it automatically finds similarities. That is its working process. And that working process is also its main negative part, because everything can be made to look similar or be similar. And Edward de Bono says similarity is the very death of thinking. The very worst thing you can say, that is the same, because here with that word, something is the same, thinking stops. After that, it's no longer thinking, it's the same. Thinking, according to Edvard de Bono, can only be difference and nothing else. Sameness is the only other thing, and that is non-thinking. It's also non-perception. So you see what Edvard de Bono is hinting to is in some ways another aspect of the thing that Ian McGilchrist so brilliantly takes out in all those 3,000 plus pages of his. It is incredibly interesting, it's deepening, but I would say there could be 1 or 2 or 3, maybe even 5 takes on this. And the take I'm going to do today is rather self-affirmation or self-conclusion. Look at the system of Gödel. The idea of that system was from the very beginning to make a system that was both consistent and coherent. They wanted to have this system. As I mentioned so many times, that was the idea of the Paris Conference in the year 1900, and it was proposed by Hilbert. They all wanted it, and when they didn't get it, they got awfully disappointed, and many leaped into depressions, and mathematics was after that never the same. I think that the dream they had was the absolute opposite what you want to have. They were actually dreaming of the death of mathematics, and not only mathematics, but also science and human existence as such. Because in a self-closed system that they want mathematics to be, there is no possibility of making any meaning. There is no possibility of any advancement. It's a standstill, stopping in the same, because consistency and non-paradoxality is same. That is what same is. You find something to be equal either as an effect or a cause. You find something to be equal either as a higher category or a subcategory. In this equality, maybe 2 subcategories are the same as 1 higher category. You see, it's all stopping at the same. And that is self-closure, and that is also self-confirmation. We've been talking earlier on many solutions to the body problem we have. How we strain ourselves and it's seemingly our joints are working rather against us and for us. Lack of balance had become a human condition to count on, and 30% of the population in Sweden are now suffering from repetitive strain injuries of different degrees and values. It's a serious problem, but I think this cannot be healed only looking at the body, because that's the old way. You can't take away the world and just look at the body, because that is a random division. It doesn't really make any sense even. It's a senseless random division, and it causes a lot more problems than it solves. Someone who dwells even deeper into this thinking is Robert Magliola. He means that Deconstruction is the only healing we can have, because all the problems are caused by closure. It's a different and more broader take on the problems with sameness, self-closure, and the pure easiness of making oneself right. And this is often called centrism within deconstruction. And self-centrism is a part of mirroring. And there's a problem here. We can go to page 66 in part 2 of Robert Magliola's rather fantastic book. As for Heidegger's famous hermeneutical circle, in this context it refers to the circular movement from understanding to interpretation and back again. Cite from Heidegger: any interpretation which is to contribute understanding must already have understood what it is to be interpreted. Heidegger grants that the hermeneutical circle is indeed circular, and that according to the most elementary rules of logic, the circle is a circular's vicious. Why so? Because in both traditional logic and scientific proof, we may not presuppose what it is our task to provide grounds for. In his iconoclastic way, Heidegger continues: if we see this circle as a vicious one and look for ways of avoiding it, even if we just sense it as an inevitable imperfection, then the art of understanding has been misunderstood from the ground up. The understanding, or first stratum of awareness, operates on the pre-objective level, and interpretation as such articulates the understanding. This is what Heidegger means when the quotation cited earlier above. He says that any interpretation which is to contribute to understanding must have already understood what it is to be interpreted. Interpretation presupposes understanding, but through the very process of articulating, interpretation provides grounds for understanding. That is, interpretation is vitalized by understanding alone, but in turn circles back, so it reveals the how and what of understanding, and indeed constitutes the exclusive agency whereby understanding manifests itself. I think this is rather good, and this shows how difficult it is to sort of slide between the different circles. It is obvious that understanding much must indeed presuppose what understanding is. I think that is a little bit similar to our eyes. To have seeing, we must have an idea what it is to see. 3 times more of the neurons are coming out than coming back. That means that our imagery is most important for seeing. And it's not that easy, as somebody says. We are comparing by sending out a great deal and getting back a lesser deal. The difference in between here, that is not at all what it is about. It is much more than that. So it's very hard with concepts to tell the two circles apart. The visual circle of self-confirmation, which has closedness as its nature, and it spirals down because it constantly becomes smaller and smaller. And this other, more open-edged circle, where you are actually supposed to have presupposition on what you think, understand, see, and so forth. And of course, Robert Magliola and also Rodolphe Gachet dwells into this subject, which is incredibly interesting. But a fourth thing, which is very promising indeed, because even though this book is 420 pages, and even though the lettering is quite big, must be 12, 13, somewhere there, it is extremely condensed. But it seems they really try to establish, Jack Petrenker and Tartantulco, a way to see how one can open up the self-confirming circle and show, by opening it up, giving it more space, you enter into the more benign circle, the hermeneutical circle of Heidegger. Because it's so easy, if you don't add space to the context, to get stuck in this idea. And this idea, or gestalt, or establishment within ourselves, doesn't lend itself to criticism. You cannot attack it full force. It is potentially benign, but it's more in something of an enhanced circularity, that a benign system goes down and becomes malignant. And I had very good help here with the idea of stable chaos systems. The only systems in the universe that actually are stable are the chaotic ones, because they have a single attractor and they get stronger for each disturbance. That is depending on their own internal force. So in the model of strange attractors, there are levels of circular things. Well, they're not really circular, but let's imagine chaotic system as a sort of circularity, because everything that is stable is a chaotic system, and therefore it's not really bad to call the circularity for chaos system. Looking at it this way, we can say that the lower, more malignant circles are lower level strange attractors. And depending where you are in this sort of elevated scale, where all these are higher up, and nota bene, this is not an ontic take. It's not correct that all these exist simultaneously. This is not an ontology. Cut out the word is here. They are not existing in that way. Once you get up to the high level, this has never existed, literally. But there is always a chance of getting higher up. And the higher you get, the more stable the system is. and the more of the external the system can take in. So it's also a matter of the resilience in the strange attractor. And all of a sudden, it is possibly not that difficult to sort of, in a broad gesture, describe the difference between the malignant, self-closed chaotic system / vicious circle, and the more benign higher up. And the higher up you get, the more disturbance the chaotic system can take. They even crave it. And one could say high up comes our own galaxy, the Milky Way, because that is extremely stable. There couldn't be a force in the universe to disturb it, not what I can think of. Not even a black star that would tear away our planetary system can rupture it. So oddly enough, they can get stronger and stronger, and they get more and more able to take in what is radically different. So identity is possible depending how much otherness you are willing to take in or can take in. It's maybe two factors there. Let me read something from page 129 from Love of Knowledge by Tatang Toko. Replication into the whole. Once more of these rather odd graphic things here. They are supposed to give a clue somehow. And there is a poetic saying, well, poetic is actually taking it a bit too far. Well, it says like this: constructs built to specifications based on, constructs placed align, defined in mirror image to build constructs. I think that should be to build constructs. Well, it could be to build constructs. It could be an adverb instead of an adjective. The patterns that we observe in analyzing memory also operates on a level still more fundamental to the founding of descriptive knowledge. Description are in essence constructs, arising in dependence on the categories and definitions supplied by language, collective knowledge, and personal experience. The original experience to which constructs are applied, whether we understand it in terms of polar knowledge or not, remains inaccessible, as though we are trying to experience the feel of a fur coat by touching it with gloves on. Here we see how self-identity and original place a thing even in memory. By trying to look for the original memory, the original presencing, the real memory, we actually in the very same process makes it shielded off by giving this part of memory this rather prioritized place. It gets a special place, and once more it is this mold that says that this is the original and the outside is the copy. And applying this to memory is another way of looking for identity, because what is the original? It's self-identical, whereas the copies are not identical even to themselves. And as these are deemed lower, we will use this mold to look for our lost memories. And all of a sudden, they are no longer so close to us, because we are making divisions preemptive. And by doing so, we shield off a great deal of what we have in our past. Let me compare to a regularly better working memory. It doesn't make any difference between real memory and not real memory. It doesn't have a pre-made mold for what is real and what is not real. It is just working. It's not so hard to think if you had a whole safe with dollar bills or something like that. If we were to count them, that would actually work rather quick. But if you know for some reason half of the bills or 1/3 of the bills or only one are actually false, the whole process of counting them will take 3, 4, 5 times as long. And this is what we're doing with this division of original and copy. We are putting random division on something that should be working more perfect, more in the order of a chaotic system. And there is somewhere some idea lingering on that there is an original, pure existing memory of a present moment somewhere in the past where I have real conception of the objects around me. You hear, the objects around me also takes a place in this memory. And they get constructed in this ego-object model. So what sort of reality are we actually looking for? It seems that we're looking for one that doesn't participate that much with something radically different, an otherness. It doesn't take in the otherness. And it thinks sort of that the external world could be generalized into these shiny objects without any density, without any depth to them. And there somewhere starts the problem, because all of a sudden both the ego and the world become presence, or looking for presence. And as we already know, both the self and the object are not present. So we cannot satisfy our need for presence. And therefore we strive even harder to make the object present. And all of a sudden you get this ludicrous memorization process going on that actually is grinding. It's like a mill where you put stones in and it starts to sound awful, horrible. What is the reason for that? Well, the reason is it doesn't work smoothly. It takes in things that are obstructing. The obstructing things are these more self-confirmatory subject and object. They are shiny, they don't have the fractality, they don't have the depth of something radically different. And all of a sudden you get this self-closure, a lower level of chaotic system that cannot take in that much otherness. Otherwise it will collapse. So these levels also have a pedagogical use, and that is, in a way, you should not strive for the higher ones directly. You need to go little by little, because there is actually an actual limitation according to physics, which is chaos theory. You cannot push it too far too early. You can, in the end, push it when the time comes, when the time is ready, when the system is resilient enough. You can push it quite a bit, and you can also day by day try to harden it, to make it more resilient, and thereby breaking through more and more. It is something of a challenge taking in the radically other. The apeiron does have its scare effect that to some extent can break because of the eternal functioning, which is so self-servant and self-helping that it doesn't have the force that the external world would bring. In a way, it is absolutely self-evident. Taking in the external world is bound to make me more balanced. I think that goes without saying. And this is maybe the strongest argument if you want to argue against the case of confinement, whatever that could be. Is it the brain in the vat, or mathematics perfection, logic perfection, or the rationality of Jordan Peterson? They are all out there on different levels of closure, and I am right, you are wrong. Maybe it's a scale, an analytical philosopher like Hilary Putnam is always right. It doesn't matter what you say. Somewhere he finds his right, where then Jordan Peterson seemed to take in a little bit of the outside. And this so well proven by Ian McGilchrist that the sickness, which is self-closure, is filling out the mental institutions today. And in working place, they are causing sick days, they are causing friction between nations, and they are causing irritability and false hope among the people. False hope of an absolute presence already now, just by wishing it. Well, bad news is not that easy, but the better news is we don't have to long unnecessarily our whole lives for something we deep inside know it's an impossibility. We can actually reach it. And quantum theory and physics have shown the path. Now down to the method, and a wide variety of methods are always better than a smaller variety. It makes for a radical difference. And the more I put in different things into my deconstruction, the more resilient and the more powerful it becomes. It is actually a bit similar to the prana. The prana also takes its force from difference, not from sameness. I wish you all a very pleasant good night. See you soon. Bye bye.